She cleaned penthouse floors on her knees for minimum wage. He ruled the Korean underworld and made men disappear with a single word. She was one missed paycheck away from the streets with 2 children she couldn't feed. He hadn't felt anything in years except the cold satisfaction of revenge. But when a terrified maid smuggled her twin toddlers into the fortress of New York's most feared gangster, neither of them could have predicted what came next. They call him the Silent Dragon because he rarely speaks, and when he does, people die. This man with dragon tattoos crawling up his neck and blood permanently stained on his hands has built an empire on fear. Yet when 2 4-year-old twins stumbled into his high-stakes mafia meeting, the man who never showed mercy did something that shocked every killer in the room. What happens when the monster everyone runs from becomes the only protector a desperate mother can trust? What happens when a heart frozen by violence starts to thaw? If you love stories that will have you holding your breath one moment and reaching for tissues the next, if you want characters that will live in your head rent-free long after this ends, subscribe right now and turn on notifications because you won't want to miss a single second. Hit that like button if you're ready to see a ruthless mafia boss brought to his knees by 2 tiny humans who don't know they're supposed to be afraid of him. And trust me, you'll want to share this with someone because when you get to the twist, you're going to need someone to scream about it with. Now, let the story begin. Joanne Bailey's phone lit up at 4:47 p.m. with the text that would change everything. "Sorry, hun, my daughter's sick. Can't watch the twins tonight. Good luck." She stared at those 9 words while her world collapsed around her. Her shift at Hwan Tower started in 43 minutes. Miss it, and she'd lose the only job that paid enough to keep the lights on. Show up late, and Mr. Chen would dock her pay again. The heat had already been shut off for 3 days. Noah had been coughing all morning. She looked at her babies, sprawling on the worn carpet of their studio apartment, building a tower with blocks that had most of the letters rubbed off. 4 years old. Too young to understand that mommy couldn't afford to lose this job. Too innocent to know that the man whose floors she scrubbed was the same man whispered about on street corners with fear in people's eyes. Joanne checked her bank account. $43 until Friday. She looked at the twins again, then at the 2 oversized laundry bags hanging by the door. No, that was insane. That was... Her phone buzzed. A notification. Rent overdue. Pay within 48 hours or face eviction proceedings. Joanne grabbed the laundry bags. "Noah, Zola, come here, babies. Mommy needs you to play a game." 20 minutes later, she stood in the service elevator of Hwan Tower with 2 laundry bags that occasionally wiggled. Her heart hammered so hard, she thought it might crack her ribs. She'd bribed the twins with the promise of happy meals and unlimited iPad time. She'd packed them into the bags like the world's worst smuggler, making them promise to stay quiet, to stay still, to pretend they were invisible. "It's like hide and seek," she'd whispered, kissing their foreheads. "The best hide and seek ever." Noah had giggled. Zola had asked if the Dragon Man would find them. Joanne had lied and said no. The elevator climbed 73 floors in absolute silence except for the hammering of her pulse and the occasional rustle from the bags. She'd done this route 100 times. She knew every corner of the penthouse, every blind spot in the cameras, every room Mr. Wang never used. The guest suite on the east wing, he never went there. It had a bathroom, a lock, and most importantly, it was far from his office. Get in. Hide them. Clean for 3 hours. Get out. Simple. The elevator doors opened to the penthouse, and the temperature dropped 10 degrees. Everything in Wang Huan's domain was monochrome. Black marble floors so polished you could see your terrified reflection. Charcoal walls. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking a New York City that looked like scattered diamonds on black velvet. Modern furniture that cost more than she'd earn in a lifetime. Not a single photograph. Not a single splash of color. The penthouse didn't feel like a home. It felt like a mausoleum. Joanne's hands shook as she dragged the laundry bags across the foyer. The sound of fabric sliding over marble echoed like thunder. "Shh," she whispered to the bags. "Almost there, babies." She made it halfway across the main living room when she heard it. A sneeze. Tiny, Childish. Absolutely devastating. Joanne froze. Her blood turned to ice. Silence swallowed the penthouse again. Maybe no one heard. Maybe she was alone. Mr. Wang was supposed to be out until midnight. The security detail only checked the lower floors. She was supposed to be invisible. She was always invisible. She grabbed the bags and ran. The guest suite was at the end of a long hallway lined with abstract art worth more than her life. She shoved the door open, dragged the bags inside, and immediately unzipped them. Noah tumbled out first, gasping for air. Zola followed, her face flushed and her eyes watering. "I sneezed, Mommy," Zola whispered, looking guilty. "I'm sorry." "It's okay, baby. You're okay." Joanne's hands trembled as she pulled out the iPad, already loaded with their favorite shows. "Remember the rules? Stay in this room. Don't open the door. Don't make noise. Mommy will be back in 3 hours and then we'll get those Happy Meals, okay? Can we have nuggets?" Noah asked. "All the nuggets you want, baby." She kissed them both, locked the door from the inside, and slipped back into the hallway. Her heart was still racing, but she'd done it. They were safe. They were hidden. She just had to clean the master suite, the office, the kitchen. The elevator chimed. No, he wasn't supposed to be home. Not for 7 more hours. Joanne dove into the nearest supply closet, pressing herself against the wall between a mop and a vacuum cleaner. Through the crack in the door, she watched as the private elevator opened. Wang Huan stepped out, and even from 30 feet away, Joanne could smell the violence on him. He wore a white dress shirt that had been white once. Now it was a Jackson Pollock of crimson splatter. His black suit jacket hung open, and she could see the dragon tattoo coiling up his neck like it was trying to strangle him. He walked with the fluid grace of a predator, flanked by 2 men in tactical gear carrying assault rifles. "Secure the perimeter," Juan said. His voice was barely a whisper, rough like gravel scraped over silk. "No one gets in. No one leaves." The guards fanned out. Joanne held her breath. Juan moved through his penthouse like a ghost, silent and deadly. He stripped off his ruined shirt without ceremony, revealing a torso covered in more ink, dragons breathing fire across his ribs, waves crashing across his chest. Korean characters she couldn't read scattered between the artwork. His body was a museum of violence, each scar a story she didn't want to know. He walked past her hiding spot close enough that she could see the blood wasn't his, close enough that she could see the exhaustion carved into his angular features, close enough that she realized Wang Huan wasn't just dangerous, he was haunted. He disappeared into his office. The guards took positions by the elevator and the main entrance. Joanne waited 5 minutes that felt like 5 hours. Then she slipped out of the closet and made her way back toward the guest suite. She'd grab the twins, take the service stairs, and... "Boss, we got incoming." One of the guards spoke into his radio. Footsteps approached. Multiple sets. Joanne didn't make it back to the guest suite. She barely made it back to the supply closet. Through the crack, she watched as 3 men entered the penthouse. They moved like they belonged here, but everything about their body language screamed threat. The one in front wore an expensive suit and a smile that made Joanne's skin crawl. "Juan," the man called out. Come out, wherever you are." Wang Huan emerged from his office, now wearing a fresh black shirt that did nothing to hide the dragon tattoos crawling up his throat. He said nothing. He simply stared at the intruder with eyes like black ice. "The Red Vipers send their regards," the man said, still smiling. "You hit 3 of our spots yesterday. That's bad for business." Juan remained silent. One of his guards shifted, hand moving toward his weapon. "We're here to negotiate," the man continued. "Or, well, deliver a message." That's when Joanne heard it. A door opening, small footsteps on marble. "No, no, no, no." "Mommy?" Zola's voice carried across the penthouse like a bell. "I'm thirsty." Time stopped. Every head turned toward the hallway where a 4-year-old girl in a mismatched pink tutu and Spider-Man shirt stood rubbing her eyes. Noah appeared behind her, clutching a toy dinosaur. The Red Viper lieutenant's smile widened. Well, didn't know you had kids, Juan." He pulled a gun. What happened next took 3 seconds, but would replay in Joanne's mind for the rest of her life. The lieutenant aimed at Zola. Wang Huan moved faster than physics should allow. One moment he was 15 feet away. The next, he was between the gun and the child, his hand wrapped around the man's wrist. The sound of bones breaking echoed like gunshots. The lieutenant screamed. Huan twisted. The gun clattered to the floor. With his free hand, he drove his elbow into the man's face with enough force that Joanne heard teeth shatter. The man went down. His companions reached for their weapons. Juan's guards were faster. "Don't," Juan whispered. It wasn't a request. The Red Viper's men froze. Juan stood there, breathing hard, his hand still outstretched in the protective gesture that had shielded Zola. Blood from the lieutenant's broken face spattered his fresh shirt. The dragon tattoos on his neck seemed to writhe in the low light. Slowly, he turned to look at the twins. Joanne watched through the crack in the door as the most feared man in New York City stared at two toddlers who stared right back with zero fear and infinite curiosity. "Hi," Noah said, waving his dinosaur. "Are you the dragon man?" Juan said nothing. He just looked at them, like he was seeing something impossible, something that shouldn't exist in his world of blood and silence. Zola walked forward. She walked right past the man crying on the floor, right past the guards with assault rifles, and stopped directly in front of Wang Huan. She tilted her head, studying the tattoos on his neck. "You have an owie," she said, pointing to a cut on his cheekbone that Joanne hadn't noticed before. "That's bleeding." Juan stared down at this tiny human who came up to his knee. His expression didn't change, but something in his eyes shifted. Something almost like confusion. Zola reached into her tutu pocket and pulled out a Hello Kitty Band-Aid. "I have these for Owies. Mommy gives them to me when I fall down." The penthouse held its breath. Then Wang Huan did something that made Joanne's heart stop. He knelt. This man, this killer, this dragon who made grown men disappear, he knelt down on his expensive marble floor, blood on his shirt, violence still crackling in the air, and let a 4-year-old girl press a Hello Kitty Band-Aid to his face. "There," Zola said, patting his cheek. "All better." "Remove them," Juan finally said, his voice barely audible. But he wasn't looking at the twins. He was looking at his guards. "The Red Vipers. Remove them from my building. Remove them from my city. I want them gone by morning." The guards moved with military efficiency, dragging the whimpering lieutenant and his companions toward the elevator. The lieutenant left a blood trail across the pristine white marble. When they were gone, silence crashed back into the penthouse. Juan stood slowly, the ridiculous pink Band-Aid still on his face, and looked at the twins. Then his eyes swept the room methodically until they landed on the supply closet, on Joanne. "Come out," he said. It wasn't loud. It didn't need to be. Joanne pushed open the door on legs that barely functioned. She stumbled into the open, immediately moving to place herself between this dangerous man and her children. "I can explain," she started, her voice breaking. "Please, the babysitter canceled and I couldn't miss my shift and I didn't know where else." "You're the cleaning woman," Juan interrupted. "Not a question." "Yes, sir. Joanne Bailey, sir. I'm so sorry. I'll leave right now. I'll never—" "How did you get past security?" "The service elevator. I hid them. I'm sorry. Please don't hurt them. Please." Tears burned in her eyes. "You can hurt me. You can fire me. But please don't hurt my babies." Juan looked at her for a long moment, then at the twins, then back at her. "Come here," he said to the children. "No." Joanne reached for them, but Noah and Zola walked forward with that fearless trust that only children possess. They looked up at this tattooed giant with his cold eyes and his blood-spattered clothes. "Do you like dinosaur nuggets?" Noah asked. For the first time, something almost like emotion crossed Wang Huan's face. Almost. "I don't know," he admitted, his rough voice barely a whisper. "They're really good," Noah continued. "Mommy promised us nuggets if we were quiet." "You weren't quiet," Juan observed. Zola sneezed. Noah said, matter of fact. Juan turned to Zola. "You sneezed." She nodded sadly. "I ruined the game." The silence stretched. Joanne waited for the order, waited for this man to call his guards back, waited for everything to end. Instead, Wang Huan walked to his desk, picked up his phone and dialed. "Send someone to get food," he said. "Children's menu. Dinosaur nuggets." He paused, looking at the twins. "Happy Meals. 2 of them. And..." Another pause. "Pizza. Large." He hung up. "Sir?" Joanne's voice trembled. "Your children will eat. Then we will talk." He looked at her directly for the first time, and Joanne saw something in those black eyes that she didn't expect. Exhaustion. Deep and endless. "Sit," he commanded, gesturing to the pristine white couch that probably cost more than her car. Joanne sat. The twins climbed up next to her, already entranced by the floor-to-ceiling windows. Wang Huan remained standing, watching them with an expression Joanne couldn't read. The Hello Kitty Band-Aid was still on his face. Blood was still on his shirt. But he didn't move, didn't speak, just watched. 40 minutes later, Noah and Zola were eating nuggets on the most expensive couch in New York, while Wang Huan sat across from them, untouched pizza on the table between them. "You don't sleep," he said suddenly, looking at Joanne. She blinked. "What?" "The circles under your eyes. When did you last sleep through the night?" I don't know. A few months? The apartment. Heat? How did he know? It's temporarily off. Babysitter? I usually have one. But tonight she canceled, and you had nowhere else to turn. So you committed the monumentally stupid act of smuggling your children into a criminal's penthouse. Joanne's throat tightened. "Yes, sir." "What's a criminal?" Zola asked through a mouthful of nuggets. Juan looked at the child for a long moment. Then, impossibly, the corner of his mouth almost twitched. "Someone who breaks rules," he said. "Like running in the house?" Noah asked. "Bigger rules." Oh, the twins returned to their food. Joanne waited for the axe to fall. Instead, Juan stood and walked to the windows, his back to them. The tattoos on his neck seemed alive in the city lights. When he spoke, his rough voice was so quiet Joanne almost didn't hear him. "I haven't slept in 6 days." Joanne didn't know what to say to that. "Every time I close my eyes, I see faces, hear screams, feel blood on my hands." He turned, and for just a moment, Joanne saw past the monster. Saw a man who was barely holding himself together. "But when your daughter handed me that Band-Aid, I felt nothing." "Nothing?" "Nothing but silence." He looked at the twins, who were now arguing about whether T-Rex or Triceratops would win in a fight. Complete silence, for the first time in weeks. The weight of his words settled over the room. "I'm going to offer you something," Juan continued. "And you're going to think I'm insane. Sir, live here." Joanne's brain short-circuited. "What?" "Move into this penthouse. You and your children. The East Wing has 3 bedrooms. You'll clean as usual. Cook if you want. But mainly," he gestured to the twins, "let them be here. You want us to live here. In your penthouse. They'll be protected. My security team will ensure no one touches them. You'll have heat, food, safety. In exchange, you maintain the household and the children remain present. You want to pay me to let my kids play in your apartment? Yes? That's insane. I'm aware." Joanne looked at her babies, who were now reenacting the dinosaur battle with nuggets. Then at this strange, terrifying man with a Hello Kitty Band-Aid on his scarred face. "Why?" she whispered. Juan was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice carried a weight that made Joanne's chest ache. "Because I'm tired of silence." That's how Joanne Bailey and her twins moved into the most dangerous penthouse in New York City. The first week was surreal. Joanne woke up every morning in a bed that probably cost more than her entire apartment's worth of furniture. The twins had their own rooms but insisted on sharing because being apart was boring. They'd turned their shared space into what Juan called a small war zone and what Joanne called kids being getting. Kids. The culture clash was immediate and constant. Then Noah and Zola happened to it. Joanne came out of the shower on day 3 to find finger paintings drying on the wall of the main living room. Her heart stopped. She rushed to take them down before Juan saw. "Leave them." She spun. Juan stood in the doorway of his office, wearing another perfectly tailored black suit. He was staring at the paintings like they were alien artifacts. "Sir, I'm so sorry. I'll clean." I said, "Leave them." He walked closer, studying the chaotic swirls of color. "What is this one?" I think it's supposed to be you." He tilted his head. The painting was mostly black and purple with what might have been a dragon or a very angry octopus. "The teeth are wrong," he said finally. "I'll tell her. Tell her the dragon should breathe fire." Then he walked away, leaving Joanne staring after him in confusion. She started noticing things about Wang Huan. Small things. He never ate breakfast. He drank his coffee black and stood by the window for exactly 15 minutes every morning, watching the city wake up. The insomnia he'd mentioned that first night was constant. He worked until 3 a.m., and by 4 a.m. she could hear him pacing through the walls. So she started cooking. Soul food, the kind her grandmother taught her. Fried chicken that made the whole penthouse smell like comfort. Mac and cheese that should be illegal. Collard greens, cornbread, sweet potato pie. Juan never ate at the table with them, but the plates she left out always came back empty. On day 9, she found him in the kitchen at 2 a.m., eating cold cornbread directly from the pan. They stared at each other. "It's good," he said finally, his raspy voice quiet. "I can heat it up." "No." He took another bite. "It's perfect like this." He finished the entire pan, never said another word, just ate her cornbread in his fortress of silence while somewhere in the East Wing, her children slept safely for the first time in months. By the 3rd week, Joanne realized Wang Huan was reorganizing his entire schedule around the twins. He came home earlier. He took calls from his office instead of the warehouse. He started keeping regular hours, which, according to his confused security team, had never happened before. "Boss wants to be here for dinner," one guard told another, sounding baffled. Juan never ate with them, but he was always there, a silent presence in the corner, watching, always watching. One night, Joanne walked past the twins' room and heard Juan's rough voice reading, "Where the wild things are." She peeked through the crack and saw him pause every few sentences, jaw clenched in pain, before forcing himself to continue. The twins didn't notice. They just snuggled closer, entranced by the Dragon Man's story time, until the day, with the SUV. "We're going out," Juan announced one Saturday morning. First words he'd spoken directly to Joanne in 3 days. "Out? The children require fresh air. They went to the park yesterday. With me." Joanne stared. "You want to take my kids out?" "They're not hostages. Get them ready." 20 minutes later, they were in the parking garage, standing next to Juan's black Escalade. The vehicle was massive, intimidating, and absolutely covered in bulletproof modifications that Joanne tried not to think about. Noah and Zola were vibrating with excitement. "Can we go to the zoo?" Zola asked. "We'll see," Juan said, which Joanne had learned was Juan's speak for, "Yes, but I don't want to admit I'm soft." They drove through New York with a security detail that made the presidential motorcade look casual. 2 SUVs in front, 2 behind. Joanne sat in the back with the twins, while Juan drove with the kind of precision that suggested he'd done high-speed chases before. They did go to the zoo. They spent 3 hours looking at animals, while Juan's security team swept every area before they entered. The twins were ecstatic. Juan said maybe 10 words the entire time, but his eyes never left the children. On the way back, they stopped for ice cream. Noah got chocolate. Zola got strawberry. Juan got nothing and looked vaguely disturbed when Zola insisted he try hers. He took the smallest taste, made a face like he'd been poisoned. "Too sweet," he muttered. The twins thought this was hilarious. They were loading back into the SUV when Zola pulled out her sticker sheet. She'd been carrying it all day, a page of sparkly unicorns and rainbows. "Mr. Dragon Man," she said seriously, "your car is very dark." Juan looked down at her. "It's black. It's sad black. It needs happy." Before anyone could stop her, Zola pressed a sparkly unicorn sticker onto the side of the Escalade, right on the door. Then another. Then Noah joined in, and suddenly the most intimidating vehicle in the criminal underworld was being decorated with rainbow unicorns and smiling dinosaurs. Joanne moved to stop them. Zola, no, that's... Leave it, Juan said quietly. She froze. What? He was staring at the stickers, at the bright, chaotic joy they represented against all his careful darkness. Leave it, he repeated. So they did. Wang Huan, head of the Jiandol, the silent dragon, drove back through New York in an SUV covered in children's stickers. His security team didn't say a word, but Joanne saw their confusion. They were almost home when it happened. A man on the sidewalk, drunk or high or both, stumbled into their path at a red light. He banged on the window, shouting obscenities. Then his eyes landed on Joanne in the back seat. The slur he used made Joanne flinch. She'd heard it before. She'd heard them all. She usually just looked away, stayed invisible, survived. But this time, the driver's door opened. Wang Huan stepped out of the vehicle in one fluid motion. He'd been silent the entire day, silent for weeks. Joanne had almost convinced herself his voice was nothing but rough whispers. She was wrong. Apologize, Juan said, and his voice rolled across the street like thunder, deep, rough, absolutely commanding. The voice of someone who'd given orders that ended lives. The drunk man looked up at this tattooed giant and sobered instantly. I said apologize, Juan repeated, and each word carried the weight of violence barely restrained. To the woman. Now, I'm sorry, get out of my sight. The man ran. Juan stood there for a moment, breathing hard, the dragon tattoos on his neck standing out in sharp relief. Then he got back in the car and drove home in absolute silence. But Joanne noticed his hands were shaking on the steering wheel. That night, after the twins were asleep, Joanne found Juan on the balcony. He stood at the railing, looking out at the city that feared him, the city he controlled with silence and violence. She almost didn't approach, almost let him be, but she thought about that voice, that rough, damaged voice he'd used to defend her. Thank you, she said quietly. For today. He didn't turn. I don't like repeating myself, I noticed. Silence stretched between them. Then, it hurts, he said finally. Speaking. Vocal cord damage from before. Every word feels like swallowing glass. He looked away. But when Noah asks for another chapter, when Zola wants me to do the dragon voice, I can't say no, even when it feels like my throat is tearing apart. Joanne's breath caught. Then why? Because some things are worth the pain. He turned to look at her then, this dangerous man with his cold eyes and his dragon tattoos and his ridiculous sparkly stickers on his car. And for the first time, Joanne saw him clearly. Not a monster, not a weapon. Just a man who'd been alone too long, trying to remember what warmth felt like. Your children talk constantly, he said, and there might have been the ghost of humor in his voice. They never stop. Questions and stories and nonsense. I know. I'm sorry. Don't be. He looked back at the city. It's the best sound I've ever heard. Uncle Kim arrived on a Tuesday afternoon when the penthouse smelled like fresh cookies and children's laughter. Joanne heard the elevator chime and looked up from where she was helping Zola frost sugar cookies that looked more like abstract art than anything edible. She knew immediately that whoever was arriving wasn't normal security. The air itself seemed to change, growing heavier with a threat she couldn't name. Wang Huan emerged from his office before the elevator doors fully opened. He moved differently than usual, every muscle tensed, predatory instincts on full alert. Joanne had learned to read his body language. Right now, it screamed danger. The man who stepped out of the elevator looked nothing like a threat. He was older, maybe 60, with kind eyes and a gentle smile. He wore an expensive suit but carried himself with grandfatherly warmth. He even had a cane with an ornate silver handle. But Juan's entire body was coiled like a spring ready to snap. Juana, the man said warmly, spreading his arms. You don't visit your uncle anymore? Uncle Kim. Joanne had heard whispers about him from the security team. The man who raised Juan. The man who taught him everything. This is unexpected, Juan said, his voice barely a whisper. I heard strange rumors. My nephew, the silent dragon, keeping strange company these days. Kim's eyes swept the penthouse and landed on Joanne and the twins. His smile never wavered, but something cold flickered in his gaze. Children. How domestic, Zola waved, frosting on her nose. Hi, do you want a cookie? They're shaped like dragons, but they look more like blobs. Kim's laugh was perfectly pleasant, perfectly false. How charming. But no, little one, I'm here to speak with my nephew about business. Joanne, Juan said quietly. Take the children to their room. She didn't need to be told twice. She scooped up both twins, ignoring their protests about the unfinished cookies, and carried them toward the east wing. But she could hear Uncle Kim's voice carrying across the marble. You've gone soft, Juana. This is not what I taught you. Things change. Men like us don't change. We rule or we die. There is no domestic bliss for dragons. Joanne closed the door, but her hands were shaking. She'd seen enough movies, heard enough stories. She knew exactly what kind of man Uncle Kim was. The kind who saw love as weakness. That night, after Kim left, Juan was different. Colder, more distant. He barely looked at the twins during dinner. When Noah asked him to read a bedtime story, Juan silently handed the book to Joanne and disappeared into his office. She found him hours later, standing by the windows in complete darkness. He doesn't approve, Juan said without turning. I gathered that. He thinks I've been compromised, that you and the children have made me weak. Have we? Juan was quiet for a long moment. Yes, and no. He turned to face her, and the raw vulnerability in his eyes made her chest ache. I've killed 17 men since you moved in. Did you know that? Joanne's breath caught. I've tortured informants, destroyed rival operations, buried bodies in places they'll never be found. But I come home, and Noah asks me if dragons like macaroni and cheese, and suddenly, he stopped. I don't know who I am anymore. Maybe you're becoming someone better. Or maybe I'm becoming someone who gets everyone around him killed. He paused, his expression darkening. I've been planning to leave the drug trade. Uncle Kim feels betrayed by that. What Kim doesn't know is that I've been building an exit strategy for months. Documentation, recordings, everything the FBI would need to dismantle the organization from the inside. Joanne's eyes widened. You're working with the FBI? I'm ensuring my exit is permanent. That when I walk away, there's nothing left to pull me back. 3 days later, the past came for Joanne in the form of her ex. Marcus showed up at the building's front entrance, demanding to see her. Security called up, and Joanne's blood went cold when she heard his name. I'll handle it, she said quickly. No, Juan said from across the room. He'd been actually reading one of Noah's picture books, studying it with the same intensity he probably used to study execution orders. Bring him up. Juan, you don't understand. He's the father. The sperm donor, Joanne corrected bitterly. He left when I was 4 months pregnant. I haven't seen him in 4 years. Then he won't leave the same way he arrived. There was something absolutely final in those words. Marcus strutted out of the elevator 20 minutes later, and Joanne was reminded of everything she'd once mistaken for confidence. He was handsome in a slick way, wearing designer clothes that were probably knockoffs. His eyes swept the penthouse with barely disguised greed. Damn, Jojo, he said, grinning. You really landed on your feet, didn't you? Went from cleaning toilets to living in the penthouse. What do you want, Marcus? Just checking on my kids. Making sure they're okay in this situation. He looked at Juan, who stood motionless in the shadows. You got a name, man? Juan said nothing, just stared with those black, empty eyes. Marcus laughed nervously. Strong, silent type. I get it. Look, Joe, I'm gonna be real with you. I'm happy you found someone. Real happy. But as the father of those kids, I've got rights. Legal rights. Unless, we can come to some kind of arrangement. You want money, Joanne said flatly. I want what's fair. What's mine? You're living large now, and I think 50 grand is reasonable for... Get out, Joanne said. 50 grand or I file for custody. I got a lawyer and everything. Gonna be a real messy battle. especially once the courts hear about the kind of man you're shacking up with. Marcus looked at Juan. You think I don't know who you are? The silent dragon? The courts will love hearing about. Juan moved. 1 second, he was across the room. The next, he had Marcus by the throat, lifted slightly off the ground, pressed against the marble pillar so hard the stone cracked. Listen carefully, Juan whispered, and even Joanne felt her blood freeze at that tone. I will say this once. You will leave this building. You will leave this city. You will never speak to Joanne again. You will never even think about those children again. Do you understand? Marcus choked, nodding frantically. If you file anything, if you contact anyone, if you so much as breathe in her direction. Juan leaned closer. They will never find your body. Do you understand? Yes, yes, please. Juan released him. Marcus crumpled to the floor, gasping. Security will escort you out, Juan said quietly. Run. Marcus ran. Joanne stood frozen, watching this man who read bedtime stories to her children, who wore sparkly unicorn stickers on his car, revert back to the monster everyone said he was. I'm sorry you had to see that, Juan said, not meeting her eyes. What are you going to do to him? Nothing, if he's smart. Juan finally looked at her. But men like him are rarely smart. Marcus's body was found in the Hudson River 3 days later. The news called it a mob hit. The investigation would go nowhere. She knew that. She also knew she should be horrified. Instead, all she felt was a sick sense of relief. That's when she realized she was in too deep. The assassination attempt came during Noah's bedtime story. Juan was in the twins' room, sitting in the small chair that made him look like a giant, reading about a princess and a dragon in that raspy voice that the twins had come to love. Joanne was in the kitchen, preparing tomorrow's lunches. The windows exploded inward. Glass shattered. Gunfire erupted. Joanne screamed and dove behind the counter as bullets tore through the penthouse like angry hornets. She could hear the security team returning fire, hear shouting and chaos, and the sound of her world ending. Then Juan was there, grabbing her arm, pulling her up. The twins! She gasped. Safe. Move. Now. He dragged her across the living room while bullets sparked off the marble around them. One of the guards was down, blood pooling beneath him. Another was exchanging fire with shadows on the balcony. The precision elevator dinged more shooters arriving. Juan shoved Joanne through a hidden door she'd never noticed before. They tumbled into a small room lined with concrete and steel. He slammed the door shut and engaged 3 separate locks. The sounds of gunfire became muffled. The twins were huddled in the corner, crying. Joanne crawled to them immediately, pulling them into her arms. You're okay, babies. You're okay. Mommy's here. Juan was at a panel in the wall, checking cameras. His jaw was tight, fury radiating from every line of his body. How many? Joanne asked. 8. Professional team. This wasn't random. Uncle Kim? Juan's silence was answer enough. They stayed in that room for 45 minutes while Juan's security team systematically eliminated the threat. Joanne held her children and watched this man, this killer, this protector coordinate a counter-assault with deadly efficiency, speaking in sharp whispers into a headset. Finally, silence fell. Clear, someone said through his earpiece. Juan didn't move. He stood with his back against the wall, breathing hard, dragon tattoos standing out in sharp relief against his neck. You're bleeding, Joanne said quietly. He looked down. A bullet had grazed his arm, leaving a crimson line across the dragon scales inked on his bicep. It's nothing. Let me see it. Joanne, let me see it. She left the twins in the corner and moved to him. He watched her approach like she might be another threat. She took his arm gently, examining the wound. It wasn't deep, but it was bleeding steadily. This needs stitches, she said. I've had worse. I know. I can see every scar. Her fingers traced the wound, and Juan went absolutely still. They were close now, closer than they'd ever been. She could feel the heat radiating from his body, smell the gunpowder and the sandalwood cologne he wore. His eyes were fixed on her face with an intensity that made her heart race. This is my fault, he said quietly. They came here because of me. They shot at you and the children because of me. You protected us. I put you in danger in the first place." His jaw clenched. "This is my world, Joanne. Violence and blood and death. Uncle Kim was right. I've gone soft, and now people see it. See you. See them." He looked at the twins. "I've painted targets on all of you, so what are you saying?" He pulled away from her touch, putting distance between them, but not before she saw something in his eyes that looked like grief. "I'm saying this was a mistake." The words hit like bullets. "Juan, you need to leave. Tonight. I'll arrange protection, a new apartment, everything you need. But you can't stay here. The kids need you." "The kids need to be alive," he said harshly. Then, softer, almost broken, I can't be the reason they die. You won't be." "You don't know that." He turned away, hands clenched into fists. "I've lost everyone I ever cared about. Everyone. My parents, my sister, every friend I've ever had. Death follows me like a shadow. I thought maybe this time would be different. But it's not. It's never different." Joanne moved closer, drawn by the raw pain in his voice. "You're not cursed, Juan. You're just scared. Of course I'm scared." He spun to face her, and his control finally cracked. "I'm terrified, because for the first time in 15 years, I have something to lose. You think I don't know what I am? I'm a monster, Joanne. I have blood on my hands that will never wash off. I've done things that would make you run screaming. And somehow, you and those children made me remember what it feels like to be human. But that's dangerous. For you. For them." They stood there in the concrete safe room, surrounded by the aftermath of violence, and Joanne finally understood. He wasn't pushing her away because he didn't care. He was pushing her away because he cared too much. "What if I don't want to leave?" she whispered. "Then, I'm a selfish bastard for wanting you to stay." He reached out, his hand hovering near her face but not quite touching. "But I'm trying very hard to do the right thing." "The right thing for who?" "For everyone." "What about what I want?" "What do you want, Joanne?" The question hung between them. She could see the hope and fear warring in his eyes, could see him barely breathing, waiting for her answer. She leaned forward slowly, giving him time to pull away. He didn't. Their lips were inches apart when Noah's sleepy voice broke the moment. "Mommy? Is the bad guys gone?" Joanne stepped back, and Juan's hand dropped to his side. The moment shattered like the windows in the living room. "Yeah, baby," she said, her voice shaking. "They're gone." But she saw the decision calcify in Juan's eyes, saw him rebuild his walls brick by brick. "Pack your things," he said, his voice back to that empty whisper. "You leave in the morning." Juan fired her with the clinical precision of a man who'd ended lives. He didn't even look at her while he did it, just stood by the windows in the cold morning light, staring at his city, and spoke in that rough whisper that used to mean safety. "Security will take you to your new apartment. First month is paid. There's money in the account I've set up for you. Enough to last years if you're careful. The children will have protection discreet, distant. You'll never see the guards, but they'll be there." "Juan!" "This is not negotiable, Miss Bailey." The formal address cut like a knife. "Your employment is terminated effective immediately. You'll sign an NDA. You'll never speak about what you've seen here. In exchange, you'll be compensated generously." Joanne felt something inside her chest crack. "You're really doing this?" "Yes. After everything. Especially after everything." He finally turned to face her, and his expression was carved from ice. The man who'd knelt for a Hello Kitty Band-Aid was gone. This was the silent dragon everyone feared. "You were an employee who overstepped boundaries. That ends now. I don't believe you." "Then you're a fool." The cruelty was deliberate, surgical, designed to make her hate him. It almost worked. "Fine," she said, her voice breaking. "We'll go. But you're going to regret this." "I already do." "I'm not talking about us. I'm talking about them." She gestured toward the room where the twins were still sleeping, blissfully unaware that their world was about to shatter again. "You're going to regret breaking their hearts." For just a second, she saw his mask slip, saw the agony beneath, then it was gone. "Leave, Miss Bailey." So she did. The new apartment was nice. Safe, expensive, everything Joanne had dreamed of before she knew what Wang Huan's penthouse felt like. It felt like a prison. The twins cried for 3 days straight. They didn't understand why they couldn't see Mr. Dragon Man anymore, why they couldn't go home. Noah stopped playing with his dinosaurs. Zola stopped talking. They stopped eating. Joanne tried everything. Happy Meals, ice cream, their favorite shows. Nothing worked. They just sat by the window, staring out at the city, searching for a building they couldn't see from here. "When can we go back?" Noah asked on day 5, his voice small. "We can't, baby." "Why?" Because Mr. Juan is very busy. Is he mad at us?" "No, sweetheart. Never at you." "Then why won't he come see us?" Joanne had no answer for that. Meanwhile, across the city, Wang Huan was destroying himself. He stopped sleeping entirely, stopped eating. His staff whispered that he'd killed 2 of Uncle Kim's men with his bare hands when they'd come to congratulate him on cutting loose the dead weight. The penthouse that had been filled with laughter and finger paintings now echoed with cold silence. He'd had someone remove all traces of Joanne and the twins. The paintings were gone. The stickers had been scrubbed from his car. The cookie sheets disappeared from the kitchen, but he couldn't erase the memory of Zola's laugh, Noah's questions, the smell of Joanne's cooking, the feeling of being human. He stood in the twins' empty room on day 6 and felt something inside him finally break. That's when Uncle Kim made his move. The call came at 3 a.m. Unknown number. Juan answered. "Juana," Kim's pleasant voice said. "You've been very difficult lately. Where are you?" "Somewhere safe. With some very precious cargo." Juan's blood froze. "If you've touched them, the woman and her brats are fine. For now. But that depends entirely on you, nephew." Kim's voice hardened. "You've been planning to leave the family business. That's unacceptable. You will sign over control of the organization to me, or these children will learn how long a fall from a building really is." "Kim, you have 2 hours. I'll send the location. Come alone or they die. Bring weapons, they die. Alert the police, they die. You understand the rules, Juana. I taught them to you." The line went dead. Juan stood in the darkness of his empty penthouse, hands shaking for the first time in 20 years. Then he grabbed his coat and left. The lunar gala was in full swing when the call came. Juan had been forced to attend a massive event where he was supposed to announce his legitimate business ventures. Uncle Kim had been invited, had even been scheduled to give a speech. Juan had suspected something was wrong when Kim didn't show. Now he knew why. He listened to Kim's demands in a bathroom, one hand gripping the sink hard enough to crack the porcelain. Then he walked out of the gala without a word, leaving 500 of New York's elite to wonder where their host had gone. The location was a construction site on the waterfront, unfinished buildings rising like skeletons against the night sky. Juan arrived to find exactly what he'd expected: Kim's men everywhere, armed and ready. And on the edge of the highest floor, 70 stories up with no railings, Uncle Kim stood holding Noah. Joanne and Zola were bound nearby, a guard standing over them. "Juana," Kim called out cheerfully. "So good of you to come. And look, you followed instructions. No weapons, no backup, just you." Juan stepped out of the elevator, hands raised. Every instinct screamed at him to attack, to kill, to destroy. But Noah was too close to the edge. One wrong move and— "Let them go," Juan said, his voice rough with barely controlled rage. "This is between us. But that's where you're wrong, nephew. This is about them. About you choosing weakness over power. About you betraying everything I taught you for a woman and her bastards. They're children. They're leverage. And you're going to sign over every business, every asset, every ounce of power to me. Or I drop the boy." Kim shifted Noah closer to the edge. The child was crying, terrified, calling for his mother. Joanne was screaming through her gag. Juan did the math in seconds. Too many guards. Too far to reach Kim in time. No weapons. No advantage. No choice. "I'll sign," he said. Kim smiled. Smart boy. That's when everything went wrong. One of Kim's men approached Juan with documents. The moment he was within range, Juan moved. He grabbed the man's weapon, used his body as a shield, and fired twice, taking out the guards nearest to Joanne and Zola. But he'd miscalculated. Kim didn't drop Noah. He pulled out a gun and aimed it at Juan. The remaining guards opened fire. Juan went down, bullets tearing through his borrowed human shield. "Did you really think I'd let you play hero?" Kim snarled. Juan struggled to his feet, blood already spreading across his shirt. He'd been hit, at least twice. But he was still moving, still fighting, because that's what monsters did. They refused to die when their family needed them. Joanne had worked the gag free. She'd been working on the ropes the entire time, using a piece of broken glass she'd palmed when they first brought her here. She wasn't some helpless damsel. She was a mother, and her children were in danger. The ropes snapped free. She spotted a guard's phone that had fallen during the chaos. With shaking hands, she dialed 911, whispered their location, then grabbed Zola and ran toward the construction materials scattered across the floor, found a pipe. Started swinging at guards' knees, causing chaos, drawing fire away from Juan. It wasn't much. But it was enough. Juan reached Kim. They collided near the edge, and Kim still had Noah. The boy was crying, terrified, reaching for Juan with small hands. "Let him go," Juan growled, blood dripping from his wounds. "You first," Kim said, and pulled the trigger. Time slowed. Juan saw the muzzle flash, saw the bullet heading toward Noah's small body, saw everything he'd tried to protect about to be destroyed. He moved without thinking, threw himself between the gun and the child. The bullet hit him in the chest. Juan went down, but not before ripping Noah from Kim's arms and pulling the boy against his chest, shielding him with his own body. They hit the ground together, and Juan felt his vision blur. His hearing faded, but he could feel Noah's heartbeat against his chest. Alive. The boy was alive. Police sirens wailed in the distance. Getting closer, Joanne had called them. "Smart woman." Kim was screaming orders, and his men were scattering. Uncle realized too late that this had been a trap, that Joanne had turned this into a rescue operation the moment she got free. Juan's last thought before the darkness took him was that he'd been right all along. Loving someone was dangerous, but maybe it was worth it. Juan woke to the sound of beeping machines and the smell of antiseptic. Hospital. He was in a hospital, which meant he wasn't dead. He tried to move and immediately regretted it. Pain lanced through his chest like fire. He'd been shot, multiple times. The memories came flooding back: Kim, the construction site, the gunfire, Noah. Juan's eyes snapped open, and he tried to sit up despite his body's violent protests. But before he could tear out his IV lines, he felt something. Weight on his chest. He looked down. The twins were asleep in his hospital bed. Noah on his left side, Zola on his right, both curled up against him like puppies. Someone had put them in matching dinosaur pajamas. They were breathing softly, completely peaceful, absolutely trusting. Joanne sat in a chair by the window. She looked exhausted, her eyes red from crying, wearing the same clothes she'd been wearing during the kidnapping. But she was alive. She was safe. "You're awake," she said quietly, standing up. "Don't move. You have 3 bullet wounds, 2 broken ribs, and more stitches than I can count. The kids are fine. Traumatized, but fine. They haven't left your side for 2 days. 2 days? You've been unconscious. The doctors said you'd lost enough blood to kill most men, but apparently you're too stubborn to die." Her voice cracked. "You idiot. You complete idiot. I had to. You took a bullet for my son." "Yes." "You almost died." "Yes." "Why?" The word came out as a sob. "Why would you do that?" Juan looked at the sleeping children on his chest, then at this woman who'd somehow made him remember what being human felt like. "Because some things are worth dying for," he said simply. Joanne crossed to the bed and took his hand carefully, avoiding the IV. Tears streamed down her face. "Kim's in custody," she said, "along with everyone who worked for him. The police are calling you a hero. Apparently, you've been feeding them information about his operations for months." She paused, her expression darkening. "Though the FBI warned that some of his old network is still out there." They said we should stay vigilant. Juan smiled slightly. I was leaving the business anyway. Might as well burn it down on my way out. They also told me something about Marcus, she continued, her voice dropping. He wasn't just a deadbeat, he was working as a low-level enforcer for the Red Vipers. The twins. She swallowed hard. They have enemy blood, Juan. Juan's expression didn't change. They have my protection. That's the only blood that matters. So what now? Now? Juan looked at the twins again. Noah was drooling on his hospital gown. Zola had somehow managed to stick several colorful stickers on his hospital gown while he slept. Now, I retire. Officially. Completely. I'll hand the legitimate businesses to people who know what they're doing. The rest can rot. And what will you do? He met Joanne's eyes. Learn to be human. If you'll help me. She laughed through her tears. You're asking me? I'm asking you. His grip tightened on her hand. I'm asking if you'll stay. Not as an employee, not because I'm paying you, but because I don't want to be without you. Any of you, Juan. I'm not good at this. At feelings or words or any of it. But I know that the days you were gone were the worst of my life. I know that I would die for these children. I know that when I thought I might never see you again, I regretted every moment I wasted pushing you away. He paused, struggling with words that hurt to say but needed to be said. I love you, Joanne Bailey. I love your children. I love the chaos and the noise and the sticky fingerprints on everything. I love who I am when I'm with you. Joanne was full-on crying now. You're proposing in a hospital bed with my kids sleeping on you. I'm asking you to stay. The proposal comes later, when I can get down on one knee without bleeding everywhere. She laughed and cried and leaned forward to kiss him carefully, mindful of his injuries. It was soft and gentle and tasted like tears and hope. When they pulled apart, Noah stirred. Mr. Dragon Man, he mumbled sleepily. You're awake? I'm awake. You got hurt. I did. Mommy said you saved me. Of course I did. Noah thought about this seriously. Then he snuggled back against Juan's side. When you get better, can we get dinosaur nuggets? Juan's rough laugh made his chest hurt, but he didn't care. All the dinosaur nuggets you want. Promise? Promise. Zola woke up then too, immediately checking to make sure Juan was still real and solid. She patted his face gently. You still have owies, she observed. I do. She dug into her pajama pocket and pulled out approximately 15 Hello Kitty Band-Aids. I brought extras. Thank you, Zola. She started applying them to every visible inch of Juan that wasn't already covered in medical equipment. Joanne watched with tears still streaming down her face, and Juan felt something settle in his chest that he'd never felt before. Peace. 3 months later, Juan stood in Central Park wearing gray, not black, holding Zola's hand, while Noah raced ahead, chasing pigeons. He'd officially retired, handed off every business to people he trusted. The penthouse was being renovated into something that felt less like a fortress and more like a home. He'd even adopted a dog at the twins' insistence, a massive rescue that was probably part wolf, but that Noah had named Princess Cupcake. The adoption papers had been finalized last week. Noah and Zola were officially Bailey Wang now, though the twins still called him Mr. Dragon Man more often than Dad. Juan said he didn't mind. He said he'd earned the title. Joanne walked beside him, wearing the engagement ring he'd given her 2 weeks ago. He'd waited until he could finally kneel without his chest screaming in protest, then led her to the penthouse balcony at sunset. Joanne Bailey, he'd said in that rough, painful voice, I don't know how to be a good man, but I know I want to spend the rest of my life learning with you. She'd said yes before he even finished, kissing him while the city lights sparkled below. Mommy, Mr. Dragon Man, look! Noah pointed at the sky where a kite was flying. I see it, baby. Juan still spoke rarely. The vocal cord damage ensured that every word hurt, but he'd started speaking more anyway, reading bedtime stories, answering Noah's 1,000 questions, telling Joanne he loved her at least once a day. Some things were worth the pain. They found a spot under a large oak tree, and Joanne spread out the blanket she'd brought. Noah immediately claimed Juan's lap, demanding stories about dragons. Zola braided flowers into Joanne's hair. Happy? Joanne asked quietly. Juan looked at his strange, impossible family, at these people who'd somehow saved him from himself, at the life he'd never imagined he could have. Yes, he said, and meant it. The silent dragon had finally learned to speak. He said, I love you. He said, we're home. But can a man with Juan's blood-soaked past truly leave it all behind? And what happens when Noah and Zola learn the truth about their biological father's fate? Smash that subscribe button and turn on notifications, because you do not want to miss what happens next. This story is about to get even more complicated. Drop a comment, do you think Juan and Joanne's love can survive when the full truth comes out? Like this video if you're obsessed with this forbidden romance between a monster learning to be human and the woman brave enough to love him anyway. The next chapter drops soon, and trust me, you are not ready for the secrets still hiding in Juan's past. See you in the next one.